Okay, good morning. It's August 23rd. We'll begin the City Council workshop. Before we start, I wanted to make kind of an announcement today. The FDA has approved its first COVID-19 vaccine as of this morning, so I'm going to read a little bit from this. It says, today the U.S. Food and Drug Administration approved the first COVID-19 vaccine. The vaccine has been known as the Pfizer-BioNTech COVID-19 vaccine. The vaccine also continues to be available under emergency use authorization, including for individuals 12 through 15 of age, and for the administration of a third dose in certain immunocompromised individuals. The FDA's approval of this vaccine is a milestone as we continue to battle the COVID-19 pandemic. While this and other vaccines have met the FDA's rigorous scientific standards for emergency use authorization as the first FDA-approved COVID-19 vaccine, the public can be very confident that this vaccine meets the high standards for safety, effectiveness, and manufacturing quality the FDA requires of an approved product, said Acting FDA Commissioner Janet Woodcock, MD. While millions of people have already safely received COVID-19 vaccines, we recognize that for some, the FDA approval of a vaccine may now instill additional confidence to get vaccinated. Today's milestone puts us one step closer to altering the course of this pandemic in the U.S. So I thought that was fantastic news to share with everybody here and everybody paying attention, because this is a community effort. So we have our first item is the water treatment plant phase 1 design build services.
Thank you very much, Council President, members of the council. So we've got quite the presentation for you today. I want to thank all of you for turning out for today to come on site, take a look at the work that's been done, some of the work that needs to be done, and introduce you to some of the concepts that we're looking at. Before I take off, I do want to introduce you to your design build team, because we were pretty informal outside. But with that, I have Steve Flett here in the front row, who is our design build project manager.
Rob?
He will be the overall coordinator of all of the work.
Exiting.
Next to him is Mr. Jim, and if I obliterate your name, I apologize, Meyerhofer.
Perfect.
Is it?
Close enough.
Darn it. Who is our design manager. He'll be heading up the design effort with Carollo. Also, we have Jeff Wall with Sladen back here in the back corner, who is heading up kind of the pre-construction manager, but I'm guessing cost analysis is a lot of what you'll be doing for us over the project. Next to him is Wayne Gresh, whom you all know. He is here to make sure that we all stay happy with their performance, if I read his role in our project correctly. And then lastly is Allie Leeds. She'll be taking on the water treatment plant lead on the design effort. So great team of individuals. We're going to talk about how these folks were selected out of all of the teams that did compete. And then they will be here to answer any of your technical related questions or process related questions as we go through this. And of course, Dick Talley, who you all know as our owner's agent.
Rob?
And we very much appreciate
Is now
it.
joining.
Did I miss anybody? No, that was everybody. Oh, Adam Smith, who is your water treatment plant superintendent, sitting quietly back there, cussing at me under his mask, I'm sure. So we want to provide you with a summary of the design builder selection process and then phase 1A services for your consideration. The relationship to your council goals is to maintain, operate, and expand your infrastructure to meet the community's needs, build a new water treatment plant, and that was and still is a 3-star item. So a little background. In March 1st of 2021, the city took ownership of the J Street property, allowing work to construct a replacement water treatment plant to commence. On March 3rd, Mr. Talley and myself were in front of you and presented a timeline for advancing the project, beginning with the clearing and preparation of the J Street property for construction. At that time, we also presented a timeline for the entire project, including advertising a request for proposals, confidential interviews, and when council would be seeing a design builder selected. So the request for proposals was advertised in the Daily Journal of Commerce as well as the Grants Pass Daily Courier to solicit proposals from firms to be the city's design builder. And that was advertised on the 22nd, the 24th, and the 29th of March. The RFP did require firms to register with the city to receive documents. All in all, 39 firms did sign up to receive the RFP. However, and this is really a key point, that was a lot of plan centers as well as subcontractors, also equipment suppliers, people who wanted to know if there was a potential option for their equipment to be included. But we did try to get them into all of the hands that we felt were relevant for the project. On April 13th and 14th, the city held confidential meetings with 4 design-build teams to discuss the project. And these confidential meetings are a really important part of this process. They're where the teams can come in and discuss details about the project, discuss some initial concepts with the city and with the team, ask detailed questions regarding the project intent and budget, all in a format that ensures that anything that they reveal will not be shared with the other teams. So as we do with most projects, we have a pre-bid meeting, and that's in the same room. Oftentimes contractors won't ask questions in those meetings because they don't want to tip a hand to their competition, or they don't want to share an idea that their competition may pick up with. Were very important. And then a little bit later, on May 24th, the city received proposals from 4 qualified teams. Those teams were made up of Jacobs and Sunt, Hewitt and GHD, Mortensen and HDR, and of course Sladen and Carollo. And I just want to take a minute here and publicly thank all of the teams for their submittals. They were all of exceptionally high quality. Our work was very difficult in grading those. I believe that each of those teams could have provided the city with an exceptional project, which is incredibly lucky. You normally don't see that in a proposal. Between May 24th and June 14th, the proposals were evaluated by a 7-member evaluation committee, including staff from the Medford Water Commission, Josephine County, and Thornton Engineering. Points were awarded based on team structure, experience of the team, project understanding, fee and rate, safety, and consideration of local labor and resource. And I know you're going, why safety?
Rob?
Why is that important? Well,
Is
a
now
team with a
exiting.
very poor safety record is going to inherently cost us more money because they are going to pay higher insurance rates. And so having that that high safety record and low injury rate keeps our costs lower. So it was very important. And then consideration of local labor and resource was another really important item for us. We wanted to see that all of those teams had a plan in place for how they could utilize the local labor and what their plan was when that didn't pan out. Because, it's great to say, okay, we're gonna come in and we're gonna use contractors for all of these jobs, and then none of those contractors are available or bidding. And then we wanna make sure that there was a plan in place after that. Scores were independently generated by all of the reviewers, and then the team met to discuss those scores as a group. And the reason for that was, I scored somebody a 0, but somebody else scored them a 25. What did I see that other person didn't see, or what did they see that I didn't see? And so we talked through anywhere where there was a huge discrepancy in the point number to see if there was anything. We didn't ultimately make anybody change their score, but we at least had that conversation to make sure that there was good reasoning. Through the proposal phase, Sladen was the overwhelming leader. This is really the key point here. If you look down below in that chart, Sladen was number 1 6 times, and the number 7th evaluator had them as their number 2 choice. That is a pretty overwhelming majority of first place position. However, there was only 10 points between the top teams, with everybody being able to win through the interview phase. So at that point, it was decided that we would invite all 4 teams to the interview, and those were held on June 26th, 2021 at the Public Safety Training Room. The interviewers were encouraged, I'm going to use the word strongly encouraged, to not use PowerPoint. We really wanted to come in and talk to the teams. We wanted to meet with them, find out who they were. We also wanted them to involve the team members that would be involved day to day over the next 4 to 5 years, because as you know, with projects like this, relationship is very important, and if we could not work well with those people, that would show up in those scores. Through the interview phase, Sladen remained the preferred constructor. and demonstrated the thorough understanding of the community, the project, and the desire to make this project successful within the stated budget. That was a real key thing. I have been very, very firm. I'm sure they'll vouch for this. Since day one, the budget is the budget. We are not talking about increasing the budget. We are talking about what we can do to make changes within the budget to make sure that that number that we've talked about since day one remains the number that we carry forward. On June 29th, we issued a notice of intent to award the water treatment plant replacement design build contract to Sladen. And since that time, staff and the owner's rep have been working with Sladen to develop a very detailed scope of work and a fee for the Phase 1A services. We're actually working on all of Phase 1 services, but I want to differentiate here because what we're doing is a little bit different. We are breaking Phase 1 services into two components, and we'll kind of talk about that here in a second. Our RFP proposed a very general scope of work. We want you to build us a water treatment plant on this piece of property. Now we want to say, okay, we now want you to tell us what technology is going to be the most effective, and we also want to then negotiate on that fee as best as we can within that scope. So that's why we are now back at this step. I also want to note that I personally have met with all of the other design builders and talked them through why they were not selected. Those were not the funnest meetings that I've ever held in my entire life. Again, because all of those teams were more than well qualified to provide our project, and all of them put in a lot of effort to come here and work in this community. So we did have those conversations, and they were not fun. So what's behind me is this is how we deliver projects in Grants Pass. We have an owner, we have an engineer, we have a contractor. And we design a project. I contract with Dick to go out and design us a project. And he comes up with a design and a bid spec. We put that project out and we bid it out and we hire a contractor. And that contractor goes out and bids the project. Then when there's issues, the contractor, of course, always says, well, the engineer designed it wrong. And the designer always goes, well, the contractor built it wrong. And you end up with difficult times sometimes resolving those issues. Several years back, quite a while, Grants Pass is a very late adopter, design build came along, which is an option whereby if you can demonstrate a public need, you can hire a design builder. And that is somebody that is both the designer and the builder. So we have one contract and one point of, if there's a failure, we go to the same person. It's not the builder saying that the designer screwed up, and it's not the designer saying the builder screwed up, because they're one and the same company, essentially. And so we can go to that person and say, this doesn't work, you need to fix it. And then it gets fixed. So that's where we have an owner, we have a design engineer, and we have a construction contractor. And underneath that construction contractor are all of the vendors and subcontractors. And I'm going to say that slide I should have looked at, because there was apparently some animation hidden on there, because all of this should show up on your one slide. But off on the side there is our owner's representative, and they are there to help us navigate through there, and they act as basically an extension of our staff through the entire process. So where are we in the process? This is where it gets a little bit tricky. We have completed this step, essentially. That's very early in the process. We are at the design definition. We have completed the design definition. That allowed us to put out the RFP. That allowed the teams to give us a proposal and respond to that RFP, as well as an initial scope and fee. Now where we're at is we need to start the preliminary services phase. This is what we generally call our Phase 1 services. Through the Phase 1 services, we do a detailed basis of design report, which is exactly what we're going to build. And I mean exactly what we're going to build, because that helps the design builder to be able to scope that and put an actual number to it, because when we get all the way through design, we need to generate our guaranteed maximum price, or our GMP. That's really what it all boils down to. When we get through that design phase, we need to then agree on a contract price to construct that water treatment plant. At that point, we move into what's either the GMP or stipulated price phase, or our Phase 2 services. Phase 2 is all about construction and startup. What I want you to notice down here The other thing about progressive design build is you still have an off-ramp. If we get through the design phase and the price is not meeting our budget, we have an opportunity to take that off-ramp and get out. We can finish up the bid documents through an agreement, and you can have a set of design or bid-ready documents to be able to go out and bid that work at a later date. We're hopeful that it doesn't come to that. We believe we'll be able to get this all done within our budget. So progressive design build will allow us to better control the pace, the cost, and the project options for the replacement water treatment plant, because we're involved and we progressively and collaboratively work the design phase through from very concept all the way to end to through construction. And typically phase one services just involve that design phase and the basis of design report. For the water plant project, however, phase one services, we're dividing those into two distinct phases. And that's phase 1A, which will be used to analyze the treatment technology, allowing you to choose the technology that'll work best on not just at the site, but for the future of grants past. So we'll come back with a very, very detailed analysis for you, and likely it'll be a fairly obvious choice as to what technology to choose. Phase 1B services at that point will be to complete roughly 90%, maybe 100% of the design of the council selected technology. And then from there, we'll generate the guaranteed maximum price and then come back to you a third time for phase 2 services, which will include both construction, startup, and commissioning, which is really the meat of the project. And we'll come back for that. The 90%, it is possible that GMP will happen anywhere between 90 and 100%. It is also possible that we will come back to you with some what we call early work packages. For those that were here during the wastewater plant, you remember that, where there was equipment that was difficult to procure or work that would benefit us to get done early. We would issue some early work packages to either procure equipment that had a very, very long lead time, or that we could lock in a very low price, or to get work done that would lead to a cost advantage later on, and we'll bring those to you as they are relevant. So this is one example of why design build is a great alternative for us. The design builder did propose this as an alternate pipeline route. As you recall, we are this orange line, which is circling from the water plant, from the intake, up Mill Street, down J Street, and onto the property. You'll remember that we came back to you and said, hey, as long as we're putting this in, we also need to include this sewer line, because if we're digging up Mill Street and J Street to this extent, we need to put that sewer line in at the same time, because the last thing we want to do is go in a year later or 2 years later or even 5 years later and dig it up and then try to fit it into this very busy street already. They said, well, what about this alternative option here? And following the ODOT right-of-way, doing a couple of bores, which are not inexpensive, don't take that wrong, but they are also very effective. And then we come back in and just tuck in here on the other side to our property. We think that that's definitely worth evaluating. You can see from the lines, if you measure those out, it is quite a bit shorter. It is all in the right-of-way, similar to the others. We're not crossing private property. And so we think that this is has an opportunity to potentially provide a better route because it is more accessible, but possibly also at a lower cost. So that's why progressive design build is such a great option.
Rob is now joining.
Okay. So phase 1 services. This is now getting into the detailed scope of work that we've been working to develop. And I have not included the scope of work. We're still working on several items within it, but we know we're basically massaging those. We have 8 tasks. Those include project management and coordination, geotechnical services, technology evaluation and selection, the basis of design report, permanent design or the full design, permitting assistance and public outreach, the guaranteed maximum price development, which also includes just the rolling price estimates as we're going through, and then the conformed document development. And conformed documents are basically the documents that have incorporated all of our comments and they're ready to construct. So task 100, general management, is where all of the the work kind of sort of happens in that for keeping the project moving. It's where we have all our project delivery plans, our monthly reports, which we're feeding back to you, all of our progress meetings, and just the nuts and bolts of the project, generating bills to send out to us, that kind of thing. The project delivery plans is a detailed set of documents that go into every aspect of how the project functions. So when we're creating a project that's roughly $60+ million in construction, we need to really have clear guidance and communication and understanding of each person's role, how documents will be transmitted, how feedback is given from us to the contractor, how they provide that feedback back to us. Those project delivery plans are part of that. And there's a stack of them, and I want to say there's probably 12 or 20. I'm getting a nod. I don't know that there's quite a few, and they do detail every aspect of how this project will run, and they are very important to ensure that everybody is speaking the same language, because it's easy to say, oh, I know exactly how we're doing that. I send it to Steve, but Steve really doesn't do anything with it. He needs it to go to Jim. So we want to work those things out on paper ahead of actually getting started to ensure that there are no mistakes. Task 200 provides additional geotechnical services. This is for a couple of reasons. One, will ensure seismic stability of specific locations on the plant site. Before, the work that we did for geotech was pretty generic, and it did prove that the site is suitable. But if we know that we're going to be building a very large structure in a very specific location, we'll want to put a hole there and get a very good geotechnical read from that exact location, because it might help inform foundation design or otherwise. We also are going to want to do some additional geotech work upon the potential pipeline. We have not done any work in that area, so we'll want to get a geotech and get some borings from that location. Task 500, and you're going to go, okay, wait, where did 3 and 400 go? I want to talk about those in more detail a little bit later. So 500 is for the complete design of the selected water plant. It will include 30, 60, and 90% design reviews, as well as corresponding cost estimates. Also includes some modeling of the intake structure. Somebody was asking about capacity. So one of the things that we will be doing is modeling that to ensure that any modifications that we do to that structure do not degrade its performance in any way. Task 600 provides for permitting and public outreach and assistance. There is quite a bit of permitting work off-site that's going to need to be coordinated, as well as reviews with Department of Human Services drinking water program, as well as city planning is going to play a fairly major role as well, Brad and his team. We've already started working with the building official. With a design build, oftentimes you're constructing before drawings are fully done, and so getting building permits can be a little bit of a challenge. And so on the wastewater plant, we actually worked out a phased approach with the building department, where we were sending in segments of drawings that were able to get approval along the way. And then 700 is the guaranteed maximum price development. So that's really that cost estimating all the way through the process, and then bringing you the guaranteed maximum price before construction. And then last is 800, which is delivery of the conformed drawing set for construction ready. So today, what we are proposing is adoption of, or that we bring you back for consideration, task order, or the task 3 and 400 primarily. There is work throughout. You'll see it in the cost estimate, which was attached in the back of the handout that I gave you. But bulk of it is 300 and 400. And that is your technology selection tasks and the basis of design. And again, there is definitely some other work that's smattered throughout there. We do need some of that geotech. We do need some of the project management. The bulk of that work is those two tasks. And this work is critical for us to determine the final cost of phase 1 services. We have to know what we're building in a lot of detail before we can figure out how much it's going to take us to design that. So 300 focuses on analyzing the various water treatment technologies, and primarily we're talking about 2 technologies, conventional and membrane technology, but there's quite a few options within there that do have the potential to either A, save us some money in design or in construction or in operation, and we want to make sure that we look at that very, very thoroughly. So factors that could affect that selection process include the site conditions. We talked about this. Change order number 3 could be a significant factor, but it may not be. As we talked about on site, it may be that because the operating costs are so much higher over here, cleaning up a little bit more of buried debris over here will save us way more money in 30-year operating costs. And that's the kind of analysis that we're going to bring back to you. But as we said, the site is contaminated, but it's the best that you could have in that there's no real contamination, and that's really not a good word, I think, to use. It just has unclean fill. Unclean fill can be dealt with. It just may mean construction costs are a little bit higher. We're going to look very detailed at capital construction costs. So what is the most inexpensive capital construction costs? And then compare that with the operations cost. We talk about this quite a lot. If it costs us 3 times more to operate, but it's only a quarter to build, those numbers will intersect in a few years just because the operating costs are so much higher. Treatment goals, we'll talk a lot about that. We know what our raw water is. What do we want the finished water to look like? We know what the federal regulations are, but do we want to supply water that is better than what the federal regulations allow? The short answer to that is yes, we currently do. We do not want to degrade our water quality that we are currently discharging, and so that'll kind of be our baseline. It has to be at least as good as what we're discharging today. And then also looking at future proofing. This is another one. Regulations are continually changing in drinking water. We want to make sure that whatever technology we select will allow us to react very quickly to potential future regulations. And staffing requirements. As we talk about year after year, every budget cycle, staff is our most expensive resource. And so if the technology that we choose ends up adding multiple staff to the roster, that's going to weigh in and it'll come out in that present worth analysis. So out of all of this work, what we get is what's called a basis of design report. And this is a report that formally documents what the city and the design builder have agreed to build. And it is very detailed, very specific, because it really does clearly define, we want a plant that does this, it's going to have this type of pretreatment, we want to see pipes that are made of this material, because that's how we develop the cost for what that design is going to be. How they develop the cost for what that's going to be. Way above my ability. But it's very, very extensive. It's going to review the conceptual design, and then we will do a complete value engineering, which we're going to talk about in just a second. And then that will be used to determine the cost for the 1B services and those final designs. In the middle of all of that is a value engineering session. And somebody had asked the question when we were out there, and I think it got answered really better than I could have answered it here. But I do want to kind of go over this again. It's going to be a 3-day effort. There will be 2 half-day sessions and 2 full-day sessions. And the first half day is really for the design build team to present the basis of design to the value engineering team. That value engineering team will then spend the next 2 days going over that basis of design report from top to bottom, talking about different concepts, different materials, you name it, every aspect of that, looking for ways that they can provide more value or reduce cost. And sometimes those are both. You can get both with the same change. The value engineering team will be comprised of city staff, owner's representative, outside subject matter experts if we can get them, and the design build team financial folks, because we need them at the table, because you don't want that value engineering team making great changes, but they just drove your budget into the stratosphere. And so by having the financial experts sitting at the table, they are able to take that change, plug it into their cost models, and give you an order of magnitude cost impact on the fly. That's really huge to the whole process. I missed one on there, and that is the constructability. That's the other piece. You don't want us, Adam and I, sitting there going, ooh, this is what would be really great, but you actually can't build it. So by having folks that are actually intimately related to construction in that room really does help. So what is the cost implications of all of this? Well, the cost for Phase 1A services is $1,378,103, not to exceed. And that covers a lot of work for a lot of different folks. At the conclusion of Phase 1A services, we will be asking council to approve the 1B services. That's to finish the design and get us ready for the GMP. We anticipate that will be an additional $4 to $6 million for the full design. Funds for 1A services are available within Project WA 6207, Water Treatment Plant Replacement. Your call to action, tentatively, this is scheduled for consideration on September 15th, but it is at your discretion. And your alternatives are we can bring this back for an additional workshop or move to council action on 9/15. And with that, I have a lot of people here ready to answer all of your questions.
I have an initial question. So I presume that the guaranteed maximum price is a pretty well-defined term, and you elaborated on it pretty well, but could you just give me a description of what that term means exactly, if there's any clauses involved with that?
Yeah.
Or is it truly, this is the price and this is what you get, circumstances regardless?
You want to take that? The short answer is we could run into something that changes that. However, the guaranteed maximum price is the price for what we expected. It will have a very clear list of this is what's included, these are the conditions and the expectations. Now, if we get in there and we change something or a technology has changed, we may have to do a change order. As you recall, on the wastewater plant, we did. But we'll also have some allowances built in there that we'll talk about when we bring you that guaranteed maximum price, and there will be an owner's pot of money. And so maybe that changes an owner desire, so we'll take that out of our pot of money. Maybe it's a design thing that didn't get fully fleshed out, and that would come out of the designer's contingency money. But yes, it is a guaranteed maximum price, but there are things that could change that.
Yeah, Val?
Yeah, I heard that word contingency, and that sparked me. So that's, I think, one of the problems we ran into in the past in some building projects was that there was not enough contingency built into projects. So can you explain that a little bit, how that works?
And you hit it right on the head. As you recall from the wastewater treatment plant project, we had built in a pot of money for seismic work. And when we finally went to bid that work, or the contractor went to bid that work, it wasn't enough. And so that work ended up not getting done. So that's why the basis of design report is so much, it's so important that we get it accurate up front. I think had we done more work on the seismic on the basis of design report for the wastewater plant, we'd have known that the amount of money that we put in that allowance was not enough to perform the work. You know, it sounded good at the offset, you know, oh, there's $1 million sitting there for that work. Well, the work was very, very involved, and it wasn't $1 million. I'm just throwing a number out there. Somebody's gonna, I know, it always comes back to me when I do that, so I'm gonna qualify that right there. But, you know, we thought we had enough in there, but when we really looked at the work, it was more technical, it was more manually intensive, and it just could not be done. So what we'll do is focus on the basis of design report. This one is definitely a little bit different. We're working on, I hate to call this a greenfield site because it's really more like a brownfield, but it is. It's not like we're working around existing infrastructure as much, and so I don't think that we'll have that issue as much.
Yeah, Kurt?
This is my, for what it's worth, statement for the day. In my years in the industry, I had experience with every one of those engineering firms and every one of those construction firms. And if you had asked me at the beginning, I would have said Slade and Corolla was by choice. So you could have saved the whole bid process.
Shoot. Should have talked to you first. Thank you, Councilor Collins. The other teams might have something to say about that.
No more questions, really?
It's called the deer in
Joel? Yeah, there you go.
Well, I'd just like to acknowledge the value of the field trip. There were a lot of questions out there that I guess if the public has any questions for us, they can answer, you know, or they can ask us through an email or whatever. But that field trip answered a lot of questions, and I felt we were on track to get done what we need, and that is have a water treatment plant that works and not fleece the public.
I was just going to say.
Yeah, go for it, Val.
And on that basis, I personally have heard the name Sladen. I have a friend who actually has worked for Sladen for years. So, but can they give some water treatment plants that they have built so that as people come to us, we can say, well, they did this, this, and this, because we will be the people that people ask the questions of.
So we have some representatives from Corolla. Do you guys want to come up and provide any supplemental information or speak in regards to the presentation at all?
Yes.
Sure.
That would
yeah,
be
come
great.
up to
Can
the
you go
mic.
up to the mic, Steve?
There's a mic right here.
Make sure that red light's on there.
So yeah, we specialize in water and wastewater treatment. So that's all we do. As well as Corolla, that's all we do is design water treatment. So we're based in state in Oregon, which hopefully you know where that's at. It's 3 hours. We drove down this morning. And so most of our work's been in Oregon, although we do kind of the Northwest. We expand out a little bit. But so we built several water treatment plants in the area. I mean, Newport, Lebanon, Lake Oswego water treatment plant. I don't know, Jeff, we got a long list, but
Sure,
he's
let
got
me
a
join in
better.
for just a minute. So here in Southern Oregon, we do not only water, but also wastewater. A lot of similar technologies between the two, a lot of similar construction techniques between the two. So in Grants Pass, years ago, we did a new UV system here. In Medford, we did a new water treatment plant addition, added ozone there. We've done maybe 4 or 5 jobs at Medford's wastewater treatment plant. And then, as Steve mentioned, as we moved down, we did a brand new greenfield water treatment plant for the city of Lebanon. Currently doing a $50 million ozone project for the city of Salem. We're also adding onto their ASR system for the city of Salem. Currently working at City of Salem's wastewater treatment plant. Steve mentioned Lake Oswego, about a $63 million full conventional plant. And part of what's important when we're talking about the plants that we've done is we've done the 2 type of technologies that we're looking at here over and over again. So Lake Oswego was a conventional plant, membrane plant at Lebanon's water treatment plant. We did Scott's conventional water treatment plant, and then several other membranes along the coast. So we have hundreds of treatment plants that we've done in the state of Oregon alone. Does that answer your question?
Yeah.
Yes, thank you. That's great information.
If you need a list, we can work with you on that as well.
Yeah, Joe.
I was just going to ask the question, for local firms that are qualified to do the work, is there going to be an opportunity for them to become involved in a competitive bidding process or whatever, so that local work, or this work could be done by local firms if they're competitive?
I'm going to let Steve talk about their plan. Yeah, please, if you would, because that was one of the things that they scored very highly on, was their local engagement plan.
Yeah, so part of the response to proposals, we provided a procurement plan. So, it's a draft, obviously, we need to work with Jason and his team, but essentially we'll line out every scope of work, and then we've reached out, did some research, and populated that with different names of local firms. So we need to work through that during the design phase to see what makes the most sense for the city of Grants Pass. And we'll work with Jason and his team on that. Other things we can do is we can have open houses. So, we need to keep the locals and the community, the contracted community aware of any opportunities so they can plan for it in their schedule. So we want to get the word out there, hey, this is coming up, and here's the opportunities that are out there. I know that we're doing the work out there right now, and we're self-performing most of that work, and I know there was some conversation about, how that works. And so, we have the ability to self-perform most of the key components of the work. We understand we've got to work through that and see what makes sense, but I think overall that gives the city flexibility. If there's no coverage or the coverage is expensive, we can step in and we can self-perform the key components.
Jim Meyerhofer again with Corolla, the design manager. I just wanted to follow up on what Jeff said. He mentioned a couple plants that are ongoing, or one of them that's done and started. One is Lebanon, which is a membrane plant. I worked on that. Ali worked on that. The Salem project, we're adding ozone to their slow sand filtration plant. Both of us worked on that. So there is a history of the team. If you look in our proposal, there's a continuity between the folks that are proposed doing the design work and that have a history of working with Slade. So we have a very excellent relationship together, which obviously will pay dividends for the city.
Yeah, go for it, Bren.
So I'm not sure if this is for Jason or for council or who this is for, but I'm just trying to get clarity on phase 1A, because it looks like we are considering it in just maybe 2.5 weeks here at the September 15th meeting. And so does that mean that council needs to provide direction on technology at that time?
No. No, what we are asking you to do is just approve the resolution which will authorize phase 1A services, which sends them off and gets them started on all of that work related to technology. We will then come back probably 10 to 12 weeks afterwards. I think we allowed 10 weeks in the schedule for that work. At the end of that, we'll come back to you probably with a pretty obvious choice for technology selection, but maybe not. Present all of that to you and get your choice for technology and authorize that phase 1B services, which will be the full design.
Great, thank you.
It looks like we're all out of questions. Thank you very much, Jason.
Thank you very much.
So next up, we have the business retention and relocation and system development charge grant programs.
All right, good morning, or afternoon as it may be. Brad Clark with Community Development, and also with me today is Susan Seawriter, our business advocate, who has much more background and experience with these grant programs than I, and of course we have Adam with finance here today as well, who can also chime in on some of the finance account budget type questions that you might have. But I think the goal for this today is Aaron and I were talking a couple of months ago. You know, council of course sees on a fairly frequent basis these grants come to you that you review and approve. But Aaron made the comment, it may have been quite some time since you actually sort of had the bigger picture about, well, you know, what exactly are these incentives, where do they derive from, and you know, what are other ways maybe the city could be using them. So I think that's really the goal today. We're certainly prepared to have this be an ongoing discussion with council, assuming that there may be some other ideas generated out of today's workshop. So the subject is to do just that, review our current process, the effectiveness of the city's economic development grant programs, and then discuss a few potential changes. And the relationship to council goals is to implement the goal to provide cooperative shared leadership involving council, staff, and the community. So listed here are the 4 grant programs that the City of Grants Pass offers. Not shown here are, you know, other incentives that businesses can tap into. You're familiar with So Ready, the regional economic development agency. They help to monitor things like the enterprise loan fund, which is a property tax abatement program, very much tied to job creation and things like that. So what we're just kind of focusing on today is just the ones that the City of Grants Pass offers that are grants. We also have an industrial loan fund. We have a micro enterprise loan fund. Those are not shown here as well. So I'm just going to go over these 4 in a little bit more detail. We have the Sdc Reimbursement District, Commercial and Nonprofit Infrastructure Incentive. That's a capital project LB 6381. Then we have what's sometimes just referred to as BRAG, the Business Retention and Relocation Assistance Grant. That's LB 6394. We have the Building Facade Grant, much smaller amount of money. And then we have Light the Storefront Security Camera Program, which is even smaller amount yet. So a little bit more detail on these 4 projects. The first one, the Sdc and Reimbursement, this has a maximum of $25,000. These are all matching grants. These are available if you're a business that has up to 50 employees. And this was combined 3 different land and building incentives that were not being utilized into one incentive. So this was a fairly recent change in 2019. This particular grant ended up it was the result of this consolidation of these other 3 programs that the city had for several years prior to that. And also in that parentheses there, you'll see previously the grants only covered transportation SDCs and required job creation tracking. Both of those ended up going away, and so neither one of those are part of the current program. So to date, we have approved and funded, and when we say funded, these are reimbursement programs, so these are not just outright grants like most grants. They're reimbursed after the applicant comes to the city and demonstrates that they have receipts and things like that. So we have 9 of these at about 120,000. And then we've also approved but haven't yet funded, meaning the applicant hasn't come back to the city with their receipts, 4 grants, estimated about 50,000. And on the BRAG, the Business Retention and Relocation grant, this is a maximum of 50,000. This is the largest program that the city offers, again, for owner-occupied up to 50 employees. This was created in 2019. With the, really kind of the purpose was related to assisting with relocation expenses. You just heard about the water treatment plant, and there was quite a bit of discussion, back then, well, what if businesses have to be forced to relocate? So that was one of the impetus, as well as there was a lot of discussion about, in 17-18, about the redevelopment of the Caveman Plaza, Town Center Plaza, and how might the city potentially assist with relocation. So that was kind of the original purpose. These are matching grants for companies having to relocate due to unforeseen circumstances or desiring to expand, and they are faced with unforeseen infrastructure costs. To date, we've had 6 grants fully funded at about just under 250,000, and approved and not yet funded. 3 of them are outstanding, about 100,000. On the building facade, we're dropping this down here. This is to 5,000 matching grant maximum. And this is really for the restoration and renovation of primarily the historic structures downtown. The Central Business District, 6th and 7th Street corridor between I-5 and the river. So it's not just limited to downtown, but that's historically where we've seen more of them. Some of the eligibility criteria for this one is design services, exterior improvements, painting, cleaning, masonry work, things like that. And so far we've issued 12 of these grants for about 43,000. And then Light the Storefront is a maximum of $1,000 matching grant. These are actually grants that do not come to the City Council. These are handled at staff level. Have not seen a lot of utilization of this program to date, but it is still there. This is mainly to encourage downtown to improve the aesthetics of their storefronts. In the grants past downtown area, there's a very specific geographic designation for who is eligible for the Light the Storefronts and the security cameras. That's basically between C Street to the north and M Street to the south. And then between 3rd and 8th Street, so largely the Central Business District. And some of the eligibility for this grant, soft lighting that spills out into public sidewalks, lighting of the, some LED lighting for windows and things like that. And we've had 10 of these funded at about $5,100. A few changes that have been to the city's grant program in the recent years. In 2015, there was a resolution passed that amended an older grant program, and that expanded, again, some of the geographic areas that were eligible. 2016 was the adoption of the urban renewal area, and that created a new grant funding source. 19, we merged I already mentioned that, we merged those 3 separate funds into one. That's what created what we have as the BRAG today. And then in 2021, just last year, we did, as part of the budget cycle, closed LB 6197. That was what was called the fire sprinkler and structural retrofit. And we moved about 31,000 of that into the BRAG. And then we also changed the application forms. We made them fillable, and here's just kind of the cover page of what we have for folks to fill out. It's much more detailed in terms of what the requirements are and what we look for before we will continue to process them. And speaking of process, this is basically how we handle it right now. So somebody files the application, the website, the economic development page of the city's website has these programs listed, and then it has Susan's name, and so they can contact her. Then once they choose to file, Susan reviews those for completeness. She meets with myself to prepare an actual recommendation. We make sure that they have all of the items there. Then we schedule it for the council business meeting. As it gets close for the packet, we prepare the staff report and the resolution and the PowerPoint. You hold your hearing, giving those opportunities for comments, and then the mayor signs a resolution. And then, of course, after that process, once somebody has actually gotten into the building permit process and they're working with community development, they've paid like their SDCs, at that point we end up having the actual funding of the grant. Here are 4 property owners that have actually used both the SDC and the BRAG. We have several that have used just one or the other, and partly because of eligibility, but many businesses are eligible to apply for both, and we have currently nothing that would prohibit them from doing so. So RPM Diesel and Weekend Brewing have both completed their grant cycles. Those amounts are shown there. And then Erickson Dental and Three Peaks Holdings, we don't have those exact amounts yet because, again, those amounts are tied to what the final is, and that there's a maximum of 75,000, between the 2 programs. So a couple of thoughts today for conversation. The first bullet there, so properties inside the urban renewal area boundary not eligible for the Sdc and Reimbursement district grants. So that LB 6381 is using an old industrial loan development grant that was community development block grant money that the city received that's kind of been sitting there, and that's basically been serving as the source for funds. There is not a renewable resource for that grant money. So the thinking behind this bullet is, since there's not a renewable resource for this particular one, but there is if you're in the urban renewal district boundary, that if you are in the urban renewal district boundary, you would not be eligible to apply for this one because there's a number of businesses that are outside the urban renewal district boundary that this would be their only pot of money that they could apply for a grant for. The second potential modification is to set two or possibly 3. We've actually talked about a couple of these different approval tiers. If the council is comfortable with what the criteria are, to date you actually have not denied any grants, and so the thought could be to save some staff time, have those smaller type grants be reviewed just at the staff level, We do this, already on the land use side. Most projects come through, they meet a certain criteria, they go through and receive an approval process. So you could authorize this kind of program change. We could also set a maximum grant of $50,000 per development project. The thinking behind that is just to kind of help extend the lifespan of LB 6381. If we choose to continue on with these types of grants, we have seen a little bit of an uptick in these, so if that continues on, it's not going to be long before the funding is dried up. So related to that one would be also which kinds of projects are eligible to apply. Right now, for example, Mr. Carl Johnson, who owns numerous properties in downtown, he several years ago had received a couple of different grants for the same basic development project. Mr. Ward Warren, same thing, just recently, 2 different tax lots, one project, but because they're 2 different lots, we said that you could have, a grant per lot. So that would be potentially another change kind of related to that third bullet would be setting a maximum to kind of help extend the lifespan, but also setting who is eligible, and that would just be a per project. It wouldn't necessarily mean per applicant or per owner, because you may have, buildings that are in different parts of the city, and as long as you're stimulating some growth and you're creating some investment in your property, do we really care who owns it if they're the same owner? Probably not. But it would be per development project, I think, to kind of help spread out that resource a little bit. And then the last one there is sunset the current 6381 grants. This one, we're just kind of throwing out there to see, where the council may want to go with it. This would probably require coming back to you with some more information to kind of show you some other ways that we could use this money. But the point here would be, rather than just having grants, there may be, other opportunities. There's a lot of communities have more of a revolving loan fund like we do for the industrial and the microenterprise. This could capitalize that. There's also, property tax related kinds of programs and incentives that a lot of other communities have. So there may be some other opportunities there. In terms of cost implication, already talked about these, 6394. Moving forward, this urban has only urban renewal funding associated with it. Now we have, in prior fiscal years, we have had 6394 funded with some general fund and the industrial loan fund as well. And we actually have a couple of outstanding projects in the BRAG that are not in the urban renewal district. But it's important to note that for this fiscal year 22 budget, LB 6394 is only urban renewal. And then 6381, I put general fund, that may not be the most accurate, because like I said, we have that's actually the industrial loan fund, monies. That is non-renewable. And it's not really depending on the number of applications, because it's non-renewable anyway, but the number of applications, I mean, if we have $2,000 or $3,000 grants, which we have issued many of those, it's going to obviously extend that for a much longer period of time than if somebody comes in with the $25,000. The main staff resources, community development time. As I mentioned before, that could be reduced if the council hearings are no longer required for smaller grants. And here's the call to action. We don't have a specific one. This is council discretion. We could move it to another workshop. You could authorize a change in the grant approval process as we've outlined here today. We could also do some more research for you to leverage that fund balance. So that's what staff has for you so far.
Okay, I think it's time for questions. Yeah, go ahead, Brian.
Thanks, Brad. My first question is actually probably for Adam, and I'm looking for, what do we have for the balance in the LB 6381?
The budgeted balance on that is currently $253,000. But I believe, as Bradley mentioned, there are some companies that may be slated to receive some of that, so I'd have to get more specific information to see how much is not already encumbered.
Okay. And then I had a question about the BRAG grants. On slide 5, it says, it provides matching grants for companies having to relocate due to unforeseen circumstances or desiring to expand and faced with unforeseen infrastructure costs. So it looks like these are for unforeseen costs. And I'm just wondering, what does unforeseen mean? Is that something that it's unforeseen to them because they don't know the process? Is it something that they run into as a part of their project? I'm just looking for a little clarity.
Sure. Yeah, and since this is the fund that started with the discussions about the water treatment plant and the potential change at Cape May Plaza, my understanding is that's where the term unforeseen really came from. But it has been kind of broadened for those that may run into, for example, a storm water or a sewer or water main that has to be upsized, or maybe there's another issue that's kind of outside their control related to a landlord-tenant type of situation where they didn't know all the information. So we those kinds of things have all been considered to be eligible.
Okay, and then it was created in 2019, and it says there, as you just stated, the original purpose had to do with the water treatment plant in Town Center Plaza. And now, I see that there's projects on this list that have nothing to do with either of those things. So I'm wondering if that has just kind of been a creep where it has kind of just gone outside of the boundaries on its own, or is that something council gave direction on, or how did that come about?
Sure, I'll look to Aaron for that.
So it's not a creep. Those were just two examples of why the program started. It wasn't specific for just the water treatment plant or Cape May Plaza. Those were two examples of potential uses of that. And so unforeseen is a word that I think needs to be maybe further defined. It's maybe unusual or not normal or ordinary. If someone's going in and they've done their due diligence, but they've provided some information, and all of a sudden, oh my gosh, it even happened at our public safety station when we had some stormwater issues or a line of a utility that was not where it was supposed to be, and this is an additional cost to the city now. This is the type of program for that, and so I think that definition could be retweaked a little bit. I think unforeseen is too vague, and that's one of the things we'd like to clean up. The couple of the other issues with that is that, well, I'll stop there, but.
Okay, thank you.
Joel?
Well, I had a couple questions. It seems like with LB 6381 grants, if it's non-renewable, it's going to sunset regardless of what we do. Does that make sense?
Yep.
So we might as well plan for it. The other thing is the properties inside the urban renewal boundary are not eligible, or to make the change that properties inside the urban renewal area would not be eligible for the SDC LB 6381 funds, trying to make them last longer for areas that are outside the urban renewal boundary. With that, then, the urban renewal funds and the grants associated with that, are they well known? I'm not that familiar being a business owner in the urban renewal area. Do people know that those grants are available?
So they do, but one of the things, you're hitting on one of the topics and concerns of why staff wanted to bring this to your attention is, I think council, we would like to have additional policy direction from council on your grant programs. Throughout the years, they've changed, and sometimes those changes have unintended consequences. For instance, when the SDC industrial fund changed to broaden that from nonprofits to commercial to just businesses in general, you're seeing a huge amount of applicants, and you're seeing the non-renewable dollars shrinking quickly. Where before, it was for nonprofits, it was for industrial, but now we've opened it up, and it's gonna go away, and it's gonna go away quick. And when that's done, then that's done. We don't have any more funds.
So I think last
And
year,
so-
there was 750,000 in that fund, if I remember correctly, and now it's down to, what did Adam say, 250?
Well.
I'm sorry,
so-
Aaron, for interrupting.
Yeah, so Adam can maybe answer.
I'd have to know where you're referring to the 750.
So, I guess before we get, maybe we can, to finish my thought.
It's not a focus, okay.
That the concern that I have is we've got these programs and we've made them, some of the grants so broad without a renewable source of revenue that they'll go away, and then they'll just stop unless we come up with and so prioritizing who really should be eligible for system development charges. It's part of the system. So if you had a prioritization again, I'm not saying going back to where it was before, maybe you do want to go that way, but it has opened it up to where those will shrink quickly. And we have two programs, BRAG and SDC of Sun, where both provide SDC incentives. And so it's a little confusing. Do I apply for this one or do I apply for that one? And then the third item is just for future policy consideration for council is we have the BRAG program, and we have these loan programs, grant programs that are available with a funding source. Now, it's not a renewable funding source, but it's urban renewal dollars. So that's a positive. And so, yeah, great, let's start doing that. But one thing that I think we would like council to consider, and we're more than happy to continue it along these lines, but from a policy perspective, when you're talking urban renewal at the end is supposed to help businesses, help incentivize private investment, and that's what system development charge reimbursement programs do and that kind of thing. That's great. But urban renewal is also there to help with large infrastructure in order to help raise the tax base of the community. And so having a defined, there is the potential discussion that I just want to bring to your attention as a caveat, is if we just continue to provide system development charge grants or smaller business retention grants out throughout the life of the urban renewal agency, that could cut $20 million out of your $50 million availability. And so having maybe a cap on that urban renewal resource, if you have certain plans for other large scale public improvements or public-private partnerships, I just want you from a policy perspective to understand that if you have that as a priority to build something big and incentivize private investment on something, it would be probably a good idea for us to think about limiting the actual urban renewal dollars to these smaller grant programs.
Hey, Kurt.
I would be in favor of the two-tiered approval process that give staff and Aaron the opportunity to review and approve. So long as council gives some direction, sets priorities, and we make it for a set period of time so that council can review the success of it down the road and continue or not.
Okay.
Yeah, and I didn't mention this, but we would certainly bring back quarterly reports or however you want to give you that update.
Hey, Rick.
I'm also in favor of the two-tier process, but I also have two questions. On the bullet point, the third bullet point, set the maximum grant to $50,000 per development project. That would not affect urban renewal projects, is that correct?
Well, I mean, it could, I think, as Aaron was just talking about, if you set a cap, then currently that it does not.
The way I hear you phrase that, Counselor, is two separate issues. I hear urban renewal project, right, which is separate from grant program.
Right.
So that would only affect the grant program maximum of $50,000. If we had an urban renewal project where we were incentivizing private investment on a $5 million project and urban renewals $2 of the $5 million, that would not affect that.
Thank you. That was a clarification I was looking for. And then on sunsetting the current LB 381. The current applicants that are in that program at this time would still remain there, but then after that, if we were to sunset it, any future applicants, that money would not be available. Is that?
That's correct. You'd want to honor what you've already approved as long as they met the guidelines of that agreement.
Okay, thank you.
So I had a couple questions. So I know we've talked about this, but properties inside URA not eligible is a recommendation. Is that basically considering that urban renewal dollars can be spent on things that the BRAG or SDC could be spent on, SDCs for, you know what I mean? Can urban renewal dollars be spent on BRAG approved or SDC approved?
Yeah,
So that's kind of the thought behind this, to spread this LB a little bit farther and have urban renewal handle urban renewal projects or upgrades or relocations?
Right.
Okay.
Exactly.
Sure. So I just wouldn't want to leave that chunk of the city without the opportunity that the rest of the city would have for subsidies and incentives. So as long as we're certain of that, then that would be fine in my opinion. Sunsetting the current grant, I think it would be wise at this time to look into opportunities or other grant ideas or programs that the council would want to do before we zero that out. I wouldn't be comfortable saying once it zeroes out, we're done with it. I think proper investigation into funds and possibilities for those grants at this time would be wise, so that we have all the information by the time it comes to really decide whether to sunset or eliminate the project, we're well informed. So that's kind of what I would like to do. So staying away from that, decision to sunset. I do also like the tiered idea, but it's very important for council to stay aware of what's being spent and where and why, because these are concerns that we're going to have once the balance starts to reduce. I'm a fan of saving staff's time because we have spent quite a bit of time in public meetings and otherwise talking about these grants. So definitely in support of that quarterly update. Any more questions?
This is Rob. I have a question.
Oh yeah, go for it, Rob.
So I think
you're very quiet. It's difficult to hear you, Rob.
So they can do it. Is this any better? Any better?
Yes, much better.
Okay. I think the tiered approach probably makes sense from an efficiency standpoint. But again, having keeping the council appraised of everything that's going on with regards to that is extremely important. The other point, and it's in some ways from a city perspective, it's a much smaller point, but from a business owner, a small business owner's perspective, it could be really large. Getting back again to Brian's question about the unforeseen circumstances and businesses being faced with unforeseen infrastructure costs, I think this kind of, the genesis of really that discussion probably goes back to about 2009 when there was two women that were opening a bridal shop, and I believe, if I remember correctly, because of a change of use and some other things, they were hit with about $13,000 worth of SDCs that really made very little sense, and it essentially it basically stopped them from moving forward with their business plan. And you could call that foreseen or unforeseen, but the point is that we've always wanted to encourage small businesses to get medium and medium businesses to get large, and because for every possible financial benefit for the city. And I think as far as the unforeseen word in that phrase, I think we need to probably just eliminate that and realize that we want to support small businesses getting larger, whether their costs are foreseen or unforeseen. So that definitely needs to be cleaned up and made clear as to why we would be supporting, even if it's predictable, their increased infrastructure costs to grow, why we would be supporting that. Thank you.
I do have another question. Going back to the urban renewal eligibility, and I believe this question was kind of asked before, but I'm not certain of the answer quite yet. Is there a current structure for property owners to apply for urban renewal agency dollars? for the style of projects that an SDC or BRAG grant would subsidize. Might be a good question for Susan or otherwise, but if we're going to eliminate grant opportunities and subsidies, incentives in the Urban Renewal Agency, then I think that we would need to decide to create a structure application form that could go through a similar process of review, so that we have equal opportunity to all the businesses in town.
So I just want to start one thing, because I can see where there's some confusion with the conversation is, but my understanding is we wouldn't be eliminating the opportunity for any business in the Urban Renewal Agency to apply for a system development charge grant or a BRAG grant. We would they would still be eligible, but under a different program. The one that we're talking about is one that would only be utilized because of a separation of resources, only be allowed for those outside the Urban Renewal Agency. Those that are inside the Urban Renewal Agency would still have the same, if not a greater opportunity for grants. It's just through a different funding source. The source is urban renewal versus a source of versus the old industrial loan fund dollars or whatever. If I'm a business in the Urban Renewal Agency, I come to the T and Road, I want an incentive for system development charges and something. I turn right to apply for the Urban Renewal BRAG. If I am outside the Urban Renewal Agency, I come to the T and the Road, I turn left to apply for the Industrial SDC business grant program.
So that's clear.
So it wouldn't be a reduction in grant opportunities for anyone within the city jurisdiction. It's just which one do I apply for? One is allowed just for those that are outside, and one is allowed for in a focus for ones that are inside.
So to clarify my question is, are those grant processes currently in place and structured for a business owner in the Urban Renewal Agency to receive those grants? Are those in place and ready for approval?
And the answer is no, unless you're, in the urban renewal district and you are going specifically for the BRAG, then they'll just use this form that we already have. But Susan and I have spent quite a bit of time talking, and we've also talked with Elaine Howard, who is our urban renewal consultant, about exactly what you just said, Council President, and that is a much more detailed outline, and Aaron has asked for this to be brought forward to you pretty soon, about exactly what those guidelines are if you're in the urban renewal district and you want to go for project X, because there's 16 different projects in the urban renewal plan. And so what is it if you're, if you want to apply for the one that's on 6th and 7th, or what if you're, downtown? There's different criteria that we have been working through, but we don't quite have feel comfortable that those are, completely well thought out in terms of the unintended consequences and things like that. But
sure,
we are working on them.
I guess with that being said, then I think there's still quite a bit of work to be done before I'm comfortable making the decision of going along with the recommendation of the eligibility in the urban renewal area and those kind of things. I think we're on the right track though, but I think that a lot of these considerations aren't fully vetted quite yet.
Well, I just wanted to add, because right now the BRAG had $400,000 from urban renewal dollars. And then we also had another funding source that had about $200,000. So when you're specifically asking a question about urban renewal, when we get an application, if they're in the urban renewal, we're going to use the BRAG urban renewal dollars. If they're not in the urban renewal, we're going to use the BRAG other resource that's not sustainable. And right now, with the SDC, with the way the BRAG works, it's only for existing businesses. So if you're not an existing business, you don't qualify for the BRAG, but you do qualify for the SDC. And that works in or out of the urban renewal right now. Does that answer more clarification?
Yeah, the first thing you said about the different pathways, as Aaron said, yes, you've provided definitely some more clarification. So
okay,
thank
good.
you.
Sure.
Yeah, Val?
I guess stay up here, Susan, because I'm not completely clear on that, because
Okay.
I'm starting to get clarity, but yeah, this is a complicated topic. But you're saying so that they come in, if they're a brand-new business, there's nothing for them unless they go for the BRAG, which is the urban.
No, unless they go for the SDC. SDC is for any business who wants to expand or has.
But that is out of the
you know.
LB 6381, which is
Yes,
non-sustainable.
that is correct.
And so that's the
Yes.
problem right now, is because that's not sustainable.
Right.
That's going to sunset. And so
Right.
that's kind of where we're at right now. And we were talking about, in one way, we don't want to just gobble up our urban renewal money through small little things, because we'd like to save it for the big things. So that's kind of where we're at right now. Am I correct?
Yeah, sort of, and I guess that's one of the things, we're long-range planning here. We could go along like this for 5 years and be totally fine. We're trying to give you a heads up
Yes.
that there's gonna be a point where, at some point, council's gonna say, hey, how come we can't give grants anymore to this? We're trying to give you a heads up to see if there's any way you wanna modify to either extend or change qualifications, because we don't want you to get to that point where it's like, all of a sudden, we don't have any money to give them, so.
Yeah. And what Brad brought up too is right now we have the BRAG and the SDC, and there are businesses that can get both of those. So would you like to see in the urban renewal, use the BRAG, which covers SDC charges up to $50,000, and then just have like an SDC grant up to $25,000 for anybody that's in the city of Grants Pass. But in the urban renewal, offer a BRAG program that covers SDCs and other infrastructure up to $50,000 just for that, and nobody can get both. I mean, that's one of your options. I mean, they can still get both because businesses have before, but that's just what we're bringing to you right now.
In order to stretch the money farther is what
Yeah.
we're saying.
Yeah.
Okay, Brian?
Makes sense.
So on the SDC grant program, looks like there's a total of 13 grants, 9 that have been funded and 4 that are in process. Do we happen to know how many of those are outside of the urban renewal district?
We do. Just grab, unless Susan is,
And it doesn't need to be exact if you just have a ballpark.
do you have that list, Susan? Do you want to?
I think so. There's about 3 in the urban renewal, and the others aren't.
So that's an excellent question, and I guess to ask it in a different sort of way. So currently, there has been urban renewal dollars utilized for these kind of grants.
Yes.
And that amount is approximately,
I think we have like 300 or
I think we'd want to get that back to you.
sure, yeah, if you
Yeah.
can get back to
And
me,
have
that'd
that in?
just be nice to know.
for urban renewal, what we had for the BRAG program? Well, no, you wouldn't, because we have some that are promised. Yeah.
Yeah.
So,
Sure, thank you. You have another question, Brian? Okay. Well, I think that kind of satisfies the questions. If I guess I'm hearing council right, is there's favor for some of these recommendations, but there's still kind of some unanswered questions about how to proceed forward exactly. So can we anticipate another meeting, or, yeah, go for it.
I've got some discussion.
Sure.
So just generally speaking about, the grant programs from kind of a high level view, I agree with what I think Aaron is saying. I feel like they're running a little rich, I guess you could say, especially the one that is non-renewable. I mean, that one's going to run out, regardless. So personally on the non-renewable, which is the LB 6381, on the SDC and Reimbursement District, I would probably be in favor of lowering the maximum amount from 25,000 maybe to like 10,000 or even 5,000, just to stretch those dollars farther. I'm seeing that the average grant in that program has only been $13,000, so I don't feel like it's really necessarily hindering anything by doing that. So that's one way that we could extend the life of that grant program. I would also be in favor of considering maybe, to help out the urban renewal, to lower the BRAG grant amount from a maximum of 50,000 to a maximum of 25,000. So that would give us more future revenue to put towards larger projects. And then the building facade and the storefront, I think, are totally fine. Those are low grant amounts that I think have a really big payback as far as you know, how our downtown looks and you know, having lighting and security downtown. So I think that's money well spent on those low grant amounts. But as far as the Bragg and the other one go, I think those amounts could be reduced and we could still provide effective grant programs for businesses in our community.
I think that's a fine recommendation to get information. I'd like to know the trends of allocation, to look at the trends and see how much of what and has been utilized before. I'd want to entertain a reduction in those amounts, you know, because we want the amounts to be appreciable to provide a true incentive, whereas we do have a motivation to spread this out a little bit more. So with that information of the trends, I'd be comfortable having that conversation. Okay, I think that one's talked about. Do you have pretty clear direction here?
So it sounds like maybe another workshop with some trends and some further details on maybe some suggestions on language changes, and we'll bring it back for further discussion.
Yeah.
Okay.
I think so. Thank you. So next up we have the, Vanessa, yes?
To add to that, I would also like to entertain the additional research to leverage 6381.
Sure.
I'm
Oh,
curious,
yeah.
I'm curious to know more about that as well.
Okay, yeah, great. Thanks for adding that. So next up we have the holiday tree.
We wish you a Merry Christmas.
All right, good afternoon, Council President, Council. Here to just give you a brief update on the holiday tree.
What a tree.
Subject summary, Council's discussion on the desire to take the lead on the acquisition and dressing of a holiday tree and provide you an update on the potential change in location. So just the general background, I don't think I'll go into detail, but at one time the Town Center Association had responsibility for the Christmas tree, and then John Bowen, through experience grants past, took that on when the Town Center Association went away. The city had taken that responsibility on, but due to budget constraints, we had looked at getting most of the events back and giving them back to the community so they'd be true community events. So during our last conversation, Council expressed an interest in identifying an alternative location for the tree, specifically with 6th Street visibility. So I did reach out to the owner of Caveman Plaza and asked if there would be a suitable location for this year's tree, and if that discussion could be, you know, further gardened. And at this point, the property owner said this year's probably not the best for that, but if I'd be willing to come to the table for future discussions and for Christmas 22 or beyond to see what other options there are. So with that in mind, the only other area I'm thinking with the time of the season is, et cetera, is if we do want something on 6th Street, we could have it here at 6th and A. It's a city-owned piece of property. It'd have high visibility of 6th Street, which I know is a desire, one of the desires of council. I'm sure there's other desires, but we could put a very large tree on that lot and have that as our community tree. Or we can look at just continuing to place the tree at its past location, which is on 5th and G Street. So ultimately, if we could get direction today from you, that would be great. I know we've got a couple of different options. There was some community members that stepped forward, and Josephine County Foundation, Youth Foundation, has said, hey, we're willing to help and support in any way possible. And also Councilor King, I think, has some additional information to add on a potential that I'll let him speak on. But from the acquisition of the tree perspective, I think we've got some community support where the city might not need to financially take on the whole burden, which is exactly the intent of us having discussions about these events a year and a half ago. So that's such good news to hear that community support is out there. We just need direction from council on where you'd like to have that tree put, and then I can work with the community members to make that happen. So with that, I turn it over to you, Council President.
Hey, Joel, do you have alternatives that you want to speak about before we open this up for discussion?
No, it fits within both alternatives,
Okay.
or probably even another potential alternative. You know, we're surrounded by federal lands, and the Three Rivers Ranger District would be very willing to donate trees.
Rick?
So, Aaron, on the Christmas tree, I think Rob Pell once mentioned before that some of the business owners down there are not in favor of the G Street location. I guess if we're to make a decision where we want to put the tree, I would like more input from the downtown business people if the majority of them are still in favor of it there and don't want to see it relocated, or I don't know if that's a feasible thing to explore or not.
So I was going to start with the survey, but I didn't want to do a survey for an alternative location until I knew that there was an alternate. So say, for instance, a property owner at Caveman Plaza said, yeah, why not? Then we would have tried to get a survey out immediately. At this point, with that option not being there, I didn't want to put a survey out saying, hey, what about another alternative location, and it stalled the process. The timing issue is a key issue. If council is concerned about input from the downtown businesses and that they don't want it there, then maybe we should seriously consider another location. And so at least we could get moving, but if we know that it's going to go in one of the two locations, we can just plan on a certain size tree, and we could try to do whatever coordinated effort, if you want, or community outreach. And you can, if they have an alternative site or a suggested site, that's great, but definitely need this direction from council.
And Rick, in response to that, I did go downtown and talk to a couple of people. I had talked to Aaron before about there not being an next choice, but I did talk to the bike shop, and he had a problem with it being there, which was one of the ones that in the past. So I had that conversation with him. He had at that time just said that at the beginning he was all for it, but then it didn't seem to bring in the business that he had hoped for. You know, so maybe for a long-range conversation, it would be okay, but he would be fine with it there. And I talked with another couple of downtown businesses that really like it there. So I feel comfortable saying that, you know, and as it does bring business downtown. I mean, I think at this point in time, if we're going to have the conversation down the road might be valid, but this year, under the circumstances, I think the location, they will be fine with it.
Yeah, Brian?
Yeah, I just had a clarifying question for Mr. King, Councilor King. You said Three Rivers Ranger District would be willing to provide support on the tree front, and is that support for one large tree or several smaller trees, or what could they do?
Well, they have about 500,000 acres, and on the average, there's too many trees on every acre. There's probably an average of 700 to 1,000 trees per acre on 500,000 acres. So I do think we can get more than one.
Well, I think my question is more, can we get one full-size tree?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
So if I may, Val, I'm going to agree with you. I think that the timeliness of this decision, it's August. We need to do it or not. All things considered, I would like to see the big tree on 5th Street as we usually do. And if we want to make further considerations to either change it or move it or not, we should be having this conversation in January of the following year so we can really have a good plan here. I don't think there's timeliness or even really appropriate to get out surveys. That's what I would be in favor of doing if, because it's sounding like staff is desiring some direction here. Yeah, Rick?
Valerie's input satisfies my curiosity, so that's what I would like to hear. So I'm happy with retaining the same location.
Okay, Brian?
Hi, this is Rob.
Yeah, you're up next. You're up next, Rob. Go for it, Ryan.
Okay.
Oh, I just wanted to say that I'm fine with Fifth Street this year. I did have a question because it looks like the funding sources listed, it shows general program operations 40,000 and committee expenses 5,000. And I could have swore at the last meeting, we didn't have any general fund available. Correct me if I'm wrong, so I'm just wondering how that went to 40,000.
Can you please restate how it went from what to what?
Oh, I thought I remembered in our last discussion about this topic that we didn't have any general fund resources available.
So this was actually started out at $50,000, but some of that money was earmarked for Art Along the Road. So there's 40,000 remaining. And so that is general program operations, and it was reported in the last presentation as such.
Great, thank you.
You're up, Rob.
Yeah, thank you. So, yeah, I actually was hoping, I actually was under the impression that Valerie and I were going to go around together and speak with some of the business owners. I'm a little disappointed that we didn't have the opportunity to do that. But, because there's very definite opinions for and against, and very strong opinions against as well. But I guess that type of survey will go for another day or another year. But I also know that when I've spoken with people, when I had mentioned options to them, I don't think that anybody was considering an option of 6th and A. I don't think that, and I'm pretty confident that I speak for even the businesses that are very much, I shouldn't say that, for many of the businesses that are against it, I don't think that they would choose 6th and A rather than G and 5th. So I think the 6th and A should be out for this year, and I would agree that for this year, the G and 5th would probably make more sense. And hopefully, maybe next year, Val and I can go around and speak with people about it together. But also, I just want to make sure that Joel knows when we talk about full-size tree, in years past, it's been a 40-foot tree. So that's been the number they've thrown around. So 40 foot's pretty large. I just want to make sure that I'm not saying it has to be a 40-foot tree, but in years past, that was the definition of a 40-foot, of a full-size tree was 40 feet. So I would be in favor this year of G and 5th, and I would be in favor of next year, actually, early next year, actually surveying the businesses in a more thorough way for a better look, what I believe to be a better location visible on 6th Street. Thank you.
Okay, so I'm seeing kind of a majority preference here. Vanessa, Kurt, do you have anything that you'd like to add to the conversation?
Yeah, I think if I've heard anything over the last 18 months, our community deeply desires some level of normality, so I would like to see it at its usual location.
I would just say as a well-known Scrooge, I'm just going to stay out of the whole conversation.
And that's your prerogative, sir. I support that entirely. Joel, did you have something to add?
Well, yes, I did. So a larger tree is available. The only thing is a larger tree will require greater expense to bring in. So, and the Forest Service wouldn't be responsible for that. It would be either the nonprofit or the city. The other thing is, it'd be nice, I think, to work with a nonprofit and have them take the lead, and if we could support them financially so that to some extent, and that way they would be responsible for making it happen, and we could have volunteers or donations go to them and not to the city.
So it looks like we have direction here. From what I'm understanding, let's do it like we've always done it. If you can garner support from youth foundations or otherwise, go for it. But if it becomes too timely or too not swift or efficient enough, I would be comfortable, if council would be comfortable, in the event, let's fund the full thing. Let's not let anything get in the way of getting this tree up.
Definitely. Council, I think I got clear direction, and that'll provide direction also for some of the, like the Josephine County Youth Association that will be able to support us also with your direction. We'll move forward and be happy to give you an update in the future.
Very good, thank you. So that's that. Next, we have agenda review. I'm not going to read what's coming up. However, this is our opportunity to talk about it.
I have a quick question. This has nothing to do with the agenda, but I believe I'm on this Friday, and I realize I'm going to be gone this Friday for the, whatever the community connection. I realize that now, so I don't know if there's anybody else who's on Friday who will be available to be there, but I know I was on it for this coming Friday, and I have made plans to be out of town, so I'm just going to put that out there.
Yeah, go for it, Ryan.
Well, I'm just looking through the agenda, and I know a little while back we talked about some of the LB projects and some of the allocations that they currently have, and we specified a short list of those that we were going to look at again at some point and possibly do reallocations. And so it's not currently on the agenda, and I would just advocate for that to get on the agenda sometime soon.
Yeah, I agree. I presume that they've been working on it. Is there any information known about how it's going, generally compiling that list of LB projects?
Well, ultimately, it just needs to be put on the schedule. From a staff perspective, we already have the LB projects and everything. It's just, I think, council taking a look at the ones that you've identified and having a discussion about maybe some reorganization of resources.
We have our agenda review this Thursday. I'll be sure to bring that up. Yeah, Val?
Yeah, I just have a question about the process of the Cape Ann pool. I don't see it on here. I was just kind of curious where that lies.
That would be probably Councilor King that can give you the best update on that.
So the committee has made very good progress. They actually have achieved consensus on the recommendation to the council. I don't want to steal their thunder or have them do the final synthesis to send it to the council. But that will be happening after our next meeting. So they're on timeline, and they've done a great job.
Okay. So basically, that's what I guess I'm saying is they're on time, so we need to make sure that it gets on the agenda to be put on the agenda soon, because it sounds like they're pretty much after this next meeting going to have, which is the 9th of September, going to have some sort of recommendation.
I'd just like to take the opportunity to thank those folks, because they've worked hard.
Okay, anything else? Yeah, go for it, Brian.
Well, I know we just had a discussion last week about all things COVID-19. We had the people from Asante here, and I know that we are trying to get some of the money from the state through the county in order to promote vaccinations, I guess. And so, you know, as timely as it is, I want us to kind of just stay on top of it. And I, you know, I feel like it's something that could probably be updated almost every week at this point, because we declared a state of emergency. The funds have not been distributed. I don't even know if we've actually formally requested the funds yet from public health or from the commissioners. I believe the request is supposed to go to public health. But I just would like us to really stay on top of that, as it is very timely.
Sure, I agree with you. Thank you for bringing that up. I will be sure to even try to prioritize that moving forward. I believe the ball is in our court at this point, since they've accepted. So they're waiting for us to have some sort of structure or a plan otherwise to secure those funds. Okay, that's all I'm hearing for agenda review. We do have an executive session. I'd entertain a motion.
Motion to move to executive session.
All right, Valerie moved and Brian seconded. All in favor? Looks like we're all in favor. Let's do it. We'll take a 5-minute break to gather ourselves.